Far, Changing Tides is a 2D adventure side-scroller released in 2022, developed in Switzerland by Ahab and published by Frontier Foundry. It's the sequel to Far, Lone Sails. In Changing Tides, we play as the sole survivor of a calamity who claims a large ocean-going vessel and sets out to search for a new home? Perhaps? Maybe? The game is very ambiguous in all aspects, and features no written dialogue, verbal description, or in-game instructions. It's neat as an experiment and makes for a thoughtful, quiet game, but most of the story is only inferred from the large murals and ruins we encounter to the set pieces we interact with, and the movement of our character. The gameplay in Far is the storytelling. As such, any discussion of the gameplay is a bit of a spoiler, but I'll leave the game's ending as a surprise. At the beginning, we explore in a diving suit until we gain access to the vessel and must learn how to use it by trial and error. Figure out how to raise the mast, angle the sails for top speed, how to quickly lower the mast to duck under low-hanging obstacles, and so on. The gameplay is, at its most basic, moving to the right. There's a pattern that repeats, keep sailing until we hit an obstacle that stops us, then explore on foot, solve a few puzzles, and unlock a new feature of the vessel by acquiring one of the core things that allows us to overcome the challenge. By the end of the game, the vessel has evolved into something more than a simple sailing ship. It's motorized, it can dive, it might even fly if you ask politely. Generally, the game presents us with a puzzle that informs the next feature it introduces to the ship. For example, to unlock the ship's engine, we first have to fire up and move a steam train. It works quite well, and the game certainly doesn't suffer from the lack of text in these sections. Rather, the experimentation is the highlight. The gameplay on foot is very similar to Inside, with puzzles that initially seem arcane but become obvious once the player experiments enough to understand how the pieces operate. Puzzles almost always involve some light platforming and machinery based around either heat, electricity, or buoyancy. Operating the ship is what sets this game apart from other walking simulators. Initially, we work a sail to catch the wind, but as we progress, additional mechanics come into play. Harvesting fuel for an engine, keeping the fire stoked, maneuvering through undersea chasms by manipulating both buoyancy and throttle, and making decisions, when to use the engine or when to surface and rely on the sail alone. It all comes together nicely to create an atmospheric experience, though it rarely challenges the player, and as far as I'm aware, there is no fail state for this game. There's a feeling I get with these sort of muted platformers like Limbo and Inside, where my opinion on the game sweetens as soon as I'm done with it. When writing the review, I think of it fondly, but during my playthrough I made note that by the midpoint the sailing had gotten stale, and by the end several of the traversal stretches required so much fiddling around that I couldn't really appreciate what I was doing. A first playthrough of Far will run around 5 hours, and frankly I found myself hoping it was over around the 3-hour mark. This might have been a consequence of the lack of dialogue. Without clearly knowing what the character was trying to accomplish, all of the player's actions never really build to a point, and it feels aimless. Without a goal in mind, all action seems reactive rather than proactive. But there were still interesting environments and set pieces after that midpoint reveal, and I don't think the game would have worked as well without them. The water in Far is bizarrely realistic, considering how stylized the remainder of the graphics are. Everything else tends to have a low poly and angular design that is currently quite popular with indie games. The style didn't grow stale over the game's runtime. There are a lot of sights to discover, though the game stops short of exploring any truly alien environments. We are mostly traveling through the ruins of destroyed civilizations, ranging from long sunk to recently moistened, with a good deal of biomes in the background as we journey. The design of ruins and machinery reminded me of Kenshi at times, with their pitted out metals and bizarre, open-air clockwork innards. The game world has been built with care, and there are many moments of beauty to be found. A huge whale plowing in from the background, or jellyfish dancing upwards towards the moon. Or the ruins, cold and quiet in deep places. There's a lot to discover in the ocean of Far. The soundtrack is fairly atypical for a video game. It comes in short bursts and has a variety of rather uncommon instruments. You'll hear cello, mandolin, and even some accordion. It's dark and moody, sometimes triumphant, but most often a little somber. The music definitely sets the tone, and certainly coheres well with the slower, more thoughtful pace of the gameplay. My biggest complaint with the music is that there wasn't more of it. In my playthrough, there were nearly half-hour periods of silence between songs. While I appreciate a quiet moment in a game, it seemed like it was a little too quiet a little too often. On the positive side, the sound effects are crisp and immersive. In summary, Far Changing Tides is a quiet, subdued platformer with some light puzzle elements. Gameplay centers around learning to operate a mysterious vessel, and the game contains no text or dialogue during the playthrough. Music and graphics are an obvious highlight of the experience, but gameplay can become plodding around the midpoint. I'd recommend this game to players who are looking for an atmospheric, primarily visual experience, or to those who prefer a slower-paced game with a few inventive mechanics. The puzzles are interesting, but don't quite scratch the itch that a dedicated puzzle game offers. Likewise, the story was a little too vague to draw my full interest. On the pain scale, I'd rate this game as a moderate. I can see how others would like it, but it felt underwhelming to me, as though it was trying to take slices from several different games and didn't quite merge them neatly, or go in depth on any of the mechanics enough to break new ground. I still got some enjoyment out of it, but I wouldn't play it again and wouldn't exactly recommend it to someone with limited time to game. Well, that's all for my fourth review. See ya!